Also know that please, Anne has talked about questions, and I think there will be a point during the presentation to ask, but please don't hesitate to put questions in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat. And I will turn this over to the organizers of this event, Jenny Fontenot and Abby Cridlin, to take it away. So go away, girls.
Thanks. Well, thank you all for coming to today's presentation. We are honored to have Anne joining us here. She is the CEO of Bright Operations, and she has helped many firms, including HGA, just accelerate our company. So I'm really looking forward to having her on this presentation. I do want to say we do encourage you to turn on your videos, and I know Anne will
Really
keep
urge.
preaching that. We really urge you to turn on your videos. We'd love to see your faces, even if you're eating, even if you're drinking a whole bottle of wine. We would love to see
All
your
good.
faces in order to do that. So thank you again. And Anne, I'll let you kick off your presentation.
Okay, I love you guys for turning on your cameras. That was awesome. So thank you. That's good. There's nothing worse than giving a presentation to black dots on a board. So we're not going to have that happen. Oh, we even have a driver coming in. I love that. Nice work. Nice work. Don't go looking down or try and read the fine print. You just keep driving. Are you driving actually?
No, I'm parked. I just parked. I'm late, so I'll just take it from here.
Okay, I love it. I love
Thank
it. Okay, my first test is sharing my screen, so hold on a second, and I'm going to bring up my screen. Before we get going, like they said, we're going to do pause for questions kind of in the middle of my talk. So let's say I'm yapping at you guys for 30 minutes. So after about 15, we'll stop for some questions if you don't have any. You can write a question as soon as you have it and put it in the chat. And then when we stop, we could do it. And then, but we have a long time allowed for questions. So don't be shy. Speak up. We can have some fun. So we have about an hour together. So that's great. So I'm going to share my screen. So hold on a minute. And do you see it?
Yes.
All right. And no subtitles, which we were having a little ish with before. Okay, so here we are. I'm super psyched about talking to you tonight because I have a real belief about presentations. And everyone, if I had to give career advice to people, which I sometimes do, presentations and communications are critical. And they're critical now more than they were because things are so much more competitive than they've been, which I'll talk to you about a little bit. And so soft skills become super important to being able to distinguish you or your firm. So presentations and kind of learning about them and maybe even taking, looking at other things you could do to boost your presentations or going to Toastmasters. Anything you can do to boost this area of your life, even though it seems like it's sort of adjacent to what you do, it is really central to what you do in how you present anything, whether you're presenting an idea or whatever. So we're going to talk through some things. So I'm going to give you a little background to why I think the way most people do presentations is a little bass-ackwards. And what we really want to be doing is taking in some intelligence and thinking about, well, if that's true, what do I have to change in the way I do what I do? So anyway, let's have some fun. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is is why I'm not moving forward. So let's just see here. First thing I want to talk about are these two women. Now, what makes these gals unique is obviously they are Olympians, and they were both in Sochi and both gold medal winners. What is weird about these two, one is from, by the way, Slovenia, and the other's from Switzerland. And what's weird about these two is they were both gold medal winners in the same race. They were tied for first for the first time in Olympic history. And what that meant was So you know how they got that little scroll when you're watching the Olympics and they're coming down to hey, and it's this, 10th of a second, whatever. The difference between these two was not doable or measurable on their little counters. So, and that's because nowadays, well, they've got raw talent. Let's take that. But on top of that, they have new technologies that everybody has access to. So they have performance clothes. Their boots are performance ski boots. Their skis are high performance, high tech, this and that. Their exercise equipment is super new technologies and things like that. So competition is getting harder and harder. If you look at the design of like graphics, not everybody, but people can get their hands on really powerful computers now. People get their hands on software that is amazing. So our tools and things are leveling excellence at a high level. So when we talk about presenting and we talk about soft skills, we got to get really good at that, because that's a way that most people don't focus on, that really need to focus on it. So that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. So the first thing about presentations really is that a good presentation begins way before you start your presentation. A good presentation, you have to think a lot about your audience and exactly who your client is, and not just know your audience. You got to know in depth like what's happening. I use client and audience kind of interchangeable. So in fact, I'm going to use client more just because it's more normal to my brain. But so if you can't dive into understanding your client and being able to really use that as your guiding force in how you present and how you talk to them, you're missing the big opportunity. And so whether you are presenting to win work, or you're presenting a design to a client, or you're compelling some sort of change or action, you've got to know your client. And in fact, you have to know what their vision is. You have to know what they're about, and then design to that vision, not design to your vision of what you think they need, but their vision of where they're going and what they're trying to accomplish. And that has to be, what is that expression? Top of mind. That has to be top of mind as you are designing. So that then when you come back to present to them, again, whether you're presenting your design of something or to win a job or to compel something, you're using that framework for how you describe what you do. I could really turn off the whole presentation now, because that's really all I'm going to be talking about today. It's different versions of this. So it's super important that you get this, and I am like a zealot about it. So I'll be fascinated to hear if you have any questions on how you do that. Is usually through good question asking. And here's the dope. Here's what no one wants you to know. In my experience in our industry of design, I'm mostly familiar with architecture, engineering, and construction, but let's say graphic design, I'm also real familiar with. In my experience, that's not how people operate. Most of us look up in our firms to these other people, and you think, wow, they must have this down. They do not have this down. So I want to urge you, no matter what level you are, if you're out of school a few years, if you're mid-career, if you're whatever you are, you need to start probing to ask questions like, well, what do we know about the client? What did the client say about that? What should we be doing about this differently? And you'll have people go, oh, it's a tech company, so obviously they're trying to attract people. Oh, okay. Well, anyone could come up with that. Your job is to know the client better than anyone else. And so you can really start, nagging's the wrong word, pushing, probing to get that information, because it'll make the difference in what you present or what you talk to people about. So if you think of a great design as you take someone who's super talented in design, really just has it, breathes it, is just so on their game from a design standpoint. The difference then between a great design and a winning design is really that understanding of the client. I mean, it is that simple. So when it comes to putting a presentation together, it's not like, well, the first thing you do is this. Oh no, the first thing you need to do in the days or weeks beforehand is figure out that information about your client. Ask questions, probe people that have worked with that company before, do whatever you can do to get some information. So the short version of this recipe is to recognize that it is uber competitive and that your soft skills are going to bring you some real differentiator through deeply understanding your client and then designing and speaking to that understanding. There's that recipe. So now I want to give you a little more intelligence to think about if those things Anne is talking about are true. How do I have to change how I do things? Because this is not, I can guarantee you, this is not what your companies do. Or at least not, throughout your company. There might be some people that are really great at it, but it is not something that most people do. So let's talk about some laws of human nature that if you can buy into these laws, if you say, God, you know what? Anne's right on that. You're going to change the way you do stuff so that you can be more successful. So really ask yourselves as you do this, wow, if that's true, I have to make some changes in how I do stuff. Okay, great. So the first one is rather shocking to me. I read a Harvard Business Review article from June of 2015. And the article talked about how you've got 20 seconds when you're talking to someone before they start to evaluate whether or not you're worth talking to. That sounds really harsh. Do you know how short 20 seconds is? I mean, we can hold our breath for 20 seconds without much effort. So within the first 20 seconds, they're looking to see, wow, shall I pay attention? Shall I hang on here? Is this person am I going to learn from this person, or is this going to be a good conversation? Now, here's the kicker. The next, between 20 and 40, they're kind of making the big debate about whether they're going to hang on or not. Or have you ever been at those events where people start going like this while you're talking? That's because you're probably blithering about you. We all do it. And you know what's weird? We have a chemical that goes off in our chemical blood that gets kind of turned on when we talk about ourselves. So this, you have to kind of counter some of the weird chemical actions you're getting by talking about yourself to be curious. And this where it gets fun. You got to bring out your curious side. God, what do you do? What do you do for that company? Oh, that sounds great. What is that day like? What does that mean? And then here's the kicker. 40 seconds, you're done. If you have not related what you're talking about to the other person in 40 seconds, they're like ready to roll, ready to move on. That's under a minute. So take this to heart in terms of, so when we present our design or our company or something else, wow, you better get to stuff that's pretty important to other people rather than what's important to you. So here we go. This is, so if you take that little kind of weird building in the middle, think of that as a filter. And I'm talking about me and talking all about me, and I'm occasionally talk about them. Well, the bad news for me is very little of me gets through, and only things that are about them get through. Now, this is completely different than how most people present. So I don't know if you've ever seen the deadly map of locations that everyone wants in like the first 3 slides of a presentation. You just go, oh, please, no, not the map, not the map. Oh, God, the map, right? Terrible. map of locations, or let me show you, even though I'm only talking to you about graphic design, let me show you the 28 other things our firm does that probably has no relation to anything that anyone is wanting to hear. So if you go back to those signals, you know, how many other slides do you have? And here's our corporate org chart. And we have, oh my God, these people, you know, the person's there going, one of the things you have to realize about presentations or presenting is no one is obligated to listen to you. Even when you're presenting to win work and there's a panel that's evaluating you, they're not obligated to listen. That's not their job. Your job is to wake them up to where they should listen to you. So when you think about it, if you talk about things like what's their opportunity, how you're going to help them reach their goals. Now, if you don't know their goals, now you're dancing in an ugly territory, and most people don't know the client goals. So you got to do that pre-work to figure out what their goals are. And then you give them examples and you tell them why it's important, and you get them to, you know, learn something. Even if you have ideas or industry trends that are counter, that challenge sort of some of their ideas, oh, they would love that. Let me listen. Let me get better, right? So if you guys can believe that this filter is true, you need to ask yourself, how do I switch around how I do what I do? And I cannot wait until the next time you're doing the presentation and they whip out the map. You're just going to go, oh, please, not the map. Can we move the map? You get to do the map. Really, you never get to do the map, but you'd get to tell them things about you after they love you for what you've taught them, right? You don't get to you don't get to start with baloney about you because no one cares. That's the brutal thing about this. You've all heard the term, so what? This is really important when you're developing your messages, because again, if I get endorphins from telling you cool stuff I've done, and I'm developing my presentation, I want to tell you stuff, you have to ask yourself as you're developing your stuff, who cares? So what? Why would I do that? You know, because it's so tempting, and we've been taught, and your mentors or your people above you do it every day. They want to talk about what they've done. And so you have to kind of, and listen, it could be career limiting if you're too gnarly about this one. So don't come in with a big cannon, but you can really start to ask them, do we know enough the client? Are we talking enough about the client? Ask people, ask the question, bring it up. How can we get to know this more? So here's the ugly reality. A person's, and this includes us, by the way, you, me, our main interest is ourselves. We are not interested in other people so much as we are interested in what they can do for us, how they can make me smarter, how they can partner with me, how they can bring me some information that will help me with my client, whatever that is. So you really want to be thinking about taking to heart this information and asking yourselves, what in the world am I doing it with the map first, or doing it with a whole thing on my company before I even start talking to them about them? So that's a big opener. So I have 10 tips for presentations, but I thought, is it a good time for questions? Jenny, do you have anything for me?
Not so many questions, but just some comments.
Okay. So shall we just wait to the questions or comments or questions or whatever the heck?
Does anyone have any questions for now? You can raise your hand in Zoom as well. Otherwise, maybe
Carol and I are embarrassed that you're hitting some things on the head. Here's our locations. Here's where we are. Maybe we put our locations on top of their locations to show the crossover, but that was like the extent of it. It was disgusting.
It's crazy.
I know.
It's like you've seen our presentations, and you nailed
Here's our art chart.
the first 3 slides of every presentation.
I know.
Crazy.
And believe me, even when I come into coach, I'm often, I only get them down to 2.
Yeah.
And it's, to me, a failure, but to them, they're like, oh, and you got to show up. No, you don't. So anyway, I'm glad you have those comments. And so I'll go on and then we'll kind of reach back out to you guys in a bit. Okay, 10 tips for kick-ass presentations or kick something presentations. Okay, tip 1. Everyone gets all screwed up when they try and memorize. Memorizing the concepts you want to do, like if you want to write down the 3 concepts you want to get across, that's all good. Memorizing verbatim will make you the worst presenter on earth. It'll make you robotic in how you do things. And it'll make you so much more nervous because you know this stuff. I mean, like, I'm not nervous presenting. I didn't write down all my stuff. I know this stuff. When I was developing slides, I'm like, oh, I know what I'll say there. Yeah, I got it. So you don't memorize, even though that's kind of where people go. You have to practice. And the more you practice, and here's the other thing. When you get the guy, oh, I get stale when I practice. Okay, well, then I'd like you stale because it'll be better than what you're going to be if you don't practice. So you've really got to push people to practice. I've lived it all. On what people say. So anyway, don't memorize, write it down, write down the concepts and then wing it. And I don't mean wing the whole thing. I mean, have an outline. Don't try and memorize. I think I last memorized on the shores of Gitche Gumi or something in 5th grade. I kind of blew off all memorizing since then. And it's been a great help. So that's my first tip. Second tip. So I ran an office, a big office in LA, and I had all these people who had different disciplines that they did. So it was an engineering company and they had, mechanical and low voltage and electrical, blah, 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 other stuff, facilities management, all this stuff. So I stopped one of the guys in the hallway and I said, so what are you doing for Palmdale Medical Center? I heard we got a job. And this guy hardly knows me. He knows I run the office, but I don't know him that well for him to know my personality. So I think he was a little nervous. I said, what are you doing for them? Oh, cabling. I said, wow. And in my head, I'm going, really? You're going to say that that's what you're doing for your client? Cabling? That's kind of, a little bitty thing and, a piece of something. So I thought to myself, well, so I said to him, well, why? Why are they doing cabling? And he said, well, now he's nervous. He said, well, they've got a real old infrastructure. Okay. Now he's trying to, he knows he's not making me move off this thing. He's wishing I'd move off the thing. There's copper and there's fiber and they really needed to fix it. I mean, they needed to have a good infrastructure. Yeah, okay. Well, why this project? Why now? Why not last year? Why not next year? Why now? I mean, they're spending a ton of money. Why now? He's now blotting. I mean, he's like going like this with the perspiration. He is not digging the my line O questioning. And he goes, okay, they've got multiple facilities in Palmdale and they need to communicate better. It's too slow. They can't communicate well with student facilities. I said, okay, you're getting on to something here on what you're doing for the client, right? You're not really doing cabling. You're helping them communicate between their facilities. And I'm not kidding. After 15 minutes, I got him to say, well, they have these competitors coming to town and they see this, they're fixing their communications. It's a real competitive advantage they could have over the competitors. Okay, well, bing, bing, bing. So you don't want to talk about, oh, we're doing interior design for them. You want to talk about what your interior design is going to do for them, right? You're going to talk about how this communication, we're going to really enhance their communication so that they can be the best, with the best data or the best, quickest response or whatever that is that you can do for them. So talk as a, business partner. Talk as a business partner, not a single discipline. So when we did this with Bank of America a long time ago, we were doing their, what the heck were we doing? Their check processing center. And if they had any downtime, they lost, and this was like a long time ago. So God knows what they would lose today if their check processing center went down. But I want to say it was like $280 million a minute if their check processing center went down for some reason. So we knew their vision was, how do you stay up and running? No downtime. How do you do that? Well, by knowing that vision, we could say to them, I know you just asked us to do this, but if we did that at the same time, we could take you a lot closer to your goal of no downtime. What do you think? So when you think about some cool design you've done, like some branding thing, and you think you could take it further to help them reach their vision, if you don't know what their vision is, you can't compel anyone to do anything more, because it's not additive to them towards their vision. It's just you wanting to sell another service. Do you get what I mean? So I think you have to really know what's in the brain of your clients. You could talk to them in a different way, and will allow you to do more of what you love to do. So in other words, if you want to come up with a design that is just that much more expansive in what it could do for the vision, that might be really fun for you versus doing the task they asked you to do. So really think about this, because this could be, life-changing. So what happens when you get the jitters? When we go into Q&A, we can really talk about what to do when you have the jitters, because for everybody, it's different. For me, I have changed my mindset. My husband calls them ninja mind games that I play with my brain. And in this case, what I do is I switch it around to, no one's evaluating me if I'm giving them things that are helpful to them. So in other words, the shift is, they're not staring at me wondering if I'm stuttering or moving my hands too much or not looking at the camera or something like that. I'm able to give people things when I present. So I feel good about that. That ninja mind shift completely helped me when I present. Breathing and slowing your breath, and taking some deep breaths really helps too. And the other thing, my husband is a really great presenter. I mean, he's the kind that could do the big room and walk around and, he says that, this is so funny, that before he would present, he'd go into the men's room and he'd kind of put his hands on his hips and take some huge breaths and move his arms, because if you're stiff, you're going to appear stiff. If your body's kind of stiff, you're going to appear more nervous. So there's all sorts of things you could do that when you have the jitters, but breathing, switching the focus off you to what you're doing for others was super helpful to me. And the Wonder Woman thing that my husband did in the men's room, which is kind of weird, but there you go. That's what he would do. My fourth slide is kind of hard to read, but my point of this is, if you are talking as though there is not punctuation, no periods, no comma, no new paragraph, no one can follow you. And you get those people who just turn on the fire hose. And it's like, oh yeah, so let me tell you what we did and what we did then. And it's just like, oh my God, no one can follow you. So use punctuation for its dramatic impact. You can pause and make people really listen. So really start to think about using punctuation in terms of how, and even structure. So you'll notice that I'm doing the 10 things. It gives people, you guys are probably going, oh, she's on 4. We still have a couple. You know what I mean? Structure helps too. So provide some structure not only in how you talk, but how you deliver the information. Tell a story. So one time I was working with a client and I said, so they said, God, we just got this RFP. And I said, well, what's going on? What's the project? And they said, oh, it's to do a dining sort of food court reimagining for a huge medical center, one that we would all know the name of. And I said, oh, that's great. So then they got some more information about it, and more information. We talked about how they might present it. And she told me that this client was really wanting to reimagine food in a hospital. Like, I remember food in a hospital as something almost, it was disgusting, you know. So, but this person was thinking it could be all healthy. It could be very fresh. It could be all these things. And he goes, what I really wanted to do, this was the client was telling my friend, what I really want to do is make it a place of comfort for the visitors and make it a place to help visitors by using technology from the room. They could order food to go to bring home to their families. And I said, oh my God, you have to do an experience in your presentation, which I recommend for almost every experience. I didn't quite know how to whip it in here, but so you do this, you would do, imagine it's 4 o'clock and you just walked out of your mom's hospital room. Your kids are waiting at home, your husband's waiting at home, and you got to come home and everything's going to be okay because you're mom and you got to bring home the dinner. And imagine you put it into your phone, it's ready and waiting with your name on it. You scoop it out as you leave and you come home with a hot dinner, a hot, healthy dinner. So really use the concept of stories as you describe things, because it makes people really get it so much better. I think that's a very important point. The other thing is the revenue. If you can talk business to people who want to have business, you should also say, you know, as you're doing this, you could say, so imagine what that could do for the revenues. You know, after you've told them the story, then you could say, imagine what that would do for the revenues of this food, you know, organization, or, you know, food court, or whatever it was called. So number 6, have a compelling overarching theme, which is your story, you know, you know, your theme, your big theme, and then have 3 pertinent messages. Why people think 8 messages would be better than 3 messages, I don't really know. But everybody thinks, I'm getting in front of this person, I'm going to tell them every darn thing I know. And what that does is it just makes your presentation mushy. It, like, I don't even know what your theme is because it's too much. So if they don't fit within your theme, you either have the wrong theme or too much stuff. Hone it down to really a small number of things. And like we've talked today, we've talked about competition. We've talked about getting through filters, and I've given you some tips. I didn't try and tell you everything I've ever known about presentations. So really watch out. So you start with this theme, like my theme is how important this is to you. And I'm going to end with how important it is to you, because you always want to end with the story you start with in the beginning. Next, you want to really watch that you are not overwhelming them with a bunch of facts. You have your themes, but you don't have to go and tell them how the watch is made. Don't need to do that. Everybody wants to. And while I'm on this thing, I have a little side story I just remembered. Talk in a language that people can understand. I was with a client and they were doing a design build project. And what that meant was there were these workshops. They did 3 workshops where they'd kind of talk to the client about what they needed, and then they'd work in between, you know, these meetings, and then come back and kind of present. And my client said, oh my God, those people are so tough. They're like Stonehenge. I can't get them to talk. And I said, all right, well, let's go over who these people are. Let's go over the audience, go over the audience. And he goes, well, this guy, he has already done one of these projects at his former university that he was at. And this guy has done this, that, and the other. And then I went just a little bit deeper into who these people were. And I realized these are all performing arts people. So the fact that the performing arts person has already done a performing arts center does not mean that they can read your plans. So on the third workshop, they took all the plans out and talked to them and had drawings, visuals and things like that. Took all the plans out. They said, oh, night and day, they talked to us. I said, yeah, that's because you were like showing them Greek and they didn't know how to respond, right? And they did get the job, which I can't believe they got it after having 2 dog meetings. And finally the third one, I would have thought they were already out. But anyway, so don't forget that. That should have been one of my things. But anyway, not too many words on a slide. Guy Kawasaki, he's sort of a person here, a person who, he's a venture capitalist, but he always talks about how to do great stuff. And he says, never allow anything under 30 points. How many of us do that? So do not allow your people to write down what they are supposed to say on their slides. That is so weird. I mean, the 9 bullets that go down the thing and then they, don't. So minimize a good graphic can do a lot. So last couple ones, don't use overused terms. If you use words like collaborate, integrate, communicate, holistic, oh, okay, all of us do that. We all do that. And it's as meaningless as exercise, eat right, and get sleep. We all know we're supposed to do those things. We all know. So if you want to talk about something in terms of the way you collaborate or the way you integrate, you could say, wow, we believe and search for common ground with people. And it's from that spot that we are able to move forward and collaborate well. Okay, that's a sentence that I could kind of buy, that you're not telling me to exercise, eat right, and get sleep. So you have to really watch terms that are just, here's my favorite old slide. Let's dust off and bring in the pits. Don't do it. So really look at your words. Another thing is, and lastly, that slides have to send a message. And people make the mistake of labeling their slide instead of telling a benefit to the slides. So if you just got a text a moment ago and your husband saying dinner is ready and you're kind of tuning out, let's just say, and you come back and you look at the top, it says titles of slides must send a message. You can drift away and come back and still know what I'm talking about. So I'm always thinking, my people are under constant attack of information. I got to provide a title that will describe what they need to know if they drift away, which everybody drifts. So instead of saying, here's a plan of the East Courtyard, you would say the East Courtyard becomes the hub of campus activity. Let's just say you were showing some architectural thing. If you're going to say color palette, that's a label. Color tones bring calm by extending nature's color from outside in. Now that's kind of a long title, I'll give you that, but you get where I'm going with this. Lastly, organizational chart. Maybe it says your team to refresh Acme's brand, something like that. So remember, people are being bombarded with incoming. Help them out. Make the title of the slide something useful for them. So like I said before, I know you know I've worked with HGA and other clients, and I do love HGA. Once you've made it through their filter, you can do something like this. So I've talked to you all about how we're going to help you. The members of our team would be from planning, architecture, interior design, wayfinding, engineering, and sustainability. Great. So now let's go to questions. So you get to do, you don't ever get that stupid map, but you get to do something that talks about the groups that are there, and you can do it, but they already love you and they're interested, right? Because you just taught them some really cool things. And so then you could bring it out and they're like, oh, you know why I'm interested in that? Because they're going to help me. I just heard all about it, right? So it's real different. So my last little bit here is part of this Mind Ninja thing, is if you think of presentations as simply verbalizing how you can help your client, that's the way to go with the presentation. It's not about you. It's all about them. So I'll show you what I mean. I could have started with this, but I'm going to end with it in terms of what I do. And on the right-hand side is how you could call me or ask me a question or do any of that. So I'm going to close now, and we're going to open it up for questions. What do you got?
So thank you, Anne. Such a great presentation. We have a couple questions in the chat. I'm actually going to let Carol ask her own question since
That's
it was from a
probably
while ago.
smart. It was a while ago. So I was going back to your slide 2, where you had to talk about cabling, right?
Yeah.
And going through the process of blah, in order to try and get to what do we want to say. Do you use that as an exercise with your team when you're trying to come up with, like, doing the prep work to what is our message? Like asking the questions to try and get those guys to say what that is. Is that?
That's exactly where you have to do it. You have to
Okay.
almost ease them out of that.
Yes, because sometimes it's
But,
really
but,
hard.
but get a load of this. Theoretically, that should be how your project write-ups are. You know,
Oh.
because we used to write the project write-ups, and I look at them and I'm thinking, who cares?
Who cares? That's so boring. Yeah.
It is so boring, and it is so not a way to distinguish yourself at all, right? And they'll just, oh yeah, we designed a, you know, or a this or a brand program for people. Well, what did it do? What, you know, one of the questions that I ask people, and I mentioned it earlier, is why this project now? Because there's always a driver of urgency now. You know, I mean, it might be, oh, we wanted to do this for a million years and we finally just got the money. I get that. But oftentimes there'll be a trigger that made it. That's why we're doing it now. You know, so that's sort of a good question. But anything you can do. So in architecture, as an example, or engineering, sometimes you don't get a chance to ask the client before you see the RFP. But the mistake is believing that the RFP tells you everything you need to know. Sometimes you're not allowed to call the client after the RFP is out, but that's when you've got to pull every string you have of anyone that you know that knows those people, who else has worked there. You got to get real clever on it. I mean, bummer that we didn't know about this in advance. Bummer also that sometimes the project manager or people who will bring you this job, they don't know the answer either. I mean, like, for God's sake, how can you not know that stuff to share with us? So you got to get really clever with your research. But you're right, Carol, it is about having that exercise with people. Yeah, but why would they do that? What and what for? And then they'll finally, I mean, I'm not kidding you, 20 minutes later, well, God, let's go on to project 2. You know, takes a long time, right? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no. You got, this is yeah, it's always difficult to try and coax the message out of a bunch of engineers.